Well, hello. Hello again and welcome to PerfBytes, the weekly performance tips and tricks, but I have to tell you something, I lied. No, I didn't lie. Sadly, you try to make a commitment to something weekly, and there's always life, health, well-being, time away, things like that. I'll try to do a better job of letting you all know if I'm going to be away. I did miss a couple of Fridays here and there. But last night, I did our friends, some of my friends, at the Triangle Software Quality Assurance Association, TISQA. I did a meetup, my annual June, before the summer really hits, meetup online with our Susan Marie and Jenny. And today's episode is brought to you from one of the questions. It was a whole thing about it, Jmeter. We recorded the session, but it was about like advanced Jmeter techniques and stuff. And it devolved, or should I say evolved, elegantly into just an Ask Me Anything About Jmeter kind of session with Susan Marie and a fellow by named David. It's a great conversation about that, and Eugene as well. So we're going to talk about today's topic, which is data parameterization in the load testing world, and kind of the ways, to be very honest with you, where I learned them a long time ago, and how I make sense of them now, at least in Jmeter, but you can also figure out ways to manipulate your data for load testing based on whatever tool you're using. These concepts hopefully will help you. So we'll talk about data parameterization. But of course, we have supporters of this show, sponsors of this show, and I'll just say straight out, go visit these people who are doing fantastic things in the performance testing world. First of all, Tricentis, who owns Neotis and Flood.io. Neotis, shout out to Brian Cole. There is a Neotis pack coming. I need to get the specific dates. I think it may be an in-person Performance Advisory Council in Neotis tradition and fashion. So tune into that. That might be coming later this fall. I want to say San Diego, which is a lovely place to visit any time of the year. We did a bunch of STP cons. And the marina down there, it was very nice. There was some scotch tasting and some things by the water, and giant naval ships and boats and things is fun. So the Neotis pack is coming. At the same time, the rest of Tricentis, I think there's a fantastic Tricentis conference coming as well. And I've seen Scott Moore of Scott Moore Consulting, another sponsor, hanging out at the Tricentis headquarters there on the tour, the performance tour that he is driving around doing. So some cool stuff. Tune in to Scott Moore and Scott Moore Consulting and the SMC Journal twice weekly. Some really cool stuff happening in that neck of the woods. Catchpoint APM, our friends at Catchpoint, who have full-on digital experience management and APM solutions. But more than that, they are making strides with the web page test team from Tim and Henry and other folks. There's some really cool stuff for visualization around that. So if you haven't been recently to integrate web page test into your pipeline for web perf analysis, rendering analysis, changes, comparisons, it's some really cool stuff. So check out the latest versions of web page test, and that would be cool. There's this guy named Ryan Falk who runs Ryan Falk Consulting and has some really cool folks working for him. And go check them out. Because sometimes you just need an expert. Sometimes you need help, not just consulting services, but you need like a consultant who can also shoot it to you straight, give you the straight scoop about how this is really, what expectations to set with your management, implement new programs and practices, keep your performance game on fleek. That's a wrong use of on fleek, isn't it? I don't even know why I'm saying that. But check it out, Ryan Falk at Falk Consulting. They're a great bunch of folks. Our other casual sponsor, I have a meeting on Monday with Federico from Abstracta, and I mentioned them last night on the Jmeter shout out for Tisca, because Roger and I we're gonna get our butts in gear and actually produce a couple of videos, I think maybe a 3-part series on the Java DSL for Jmeter. If you're tired of looking at the Java XML in your repo, maybe you'd do better off actually having Jmeter scripts written in Java through an interpreter like their descriptive language. So we'll check out some stuff from Abstracta, which is pretty cool. You can check out their repo, actually, if you go to Abstracta's repo in GitHub. There you go. So Thank you to Neotis, Flood.io, Tricentis, Catchpoint, Abstracta, Scott Moore Consulting, and Ryan Falk Consulting. Wow, that's really great. Given all those sponsors, I want to let you guys also know that I think in the new year, as much as we love having individual corporate sponsors, things have changed a bit. I will admit that. We have a lot more direct input. Like today's topic, the last couple of topics I've done are brought directly from the community through our Discord group or directly from me through everything that we do. So I think we might go to a membership. Let me know what you think about that. We'll go to a direct membership for PerfBytes, like a Patreon or something like that, starting in the new year. And not that we will stop having special content like the Abstracta stuff to drill down. We did, remember, Octoperf, we did some drill down things with Octoperf. It was very cool. We did some stuff with the Zebra tester and some things in the past. So we'll still do special stuff for the big names in our industry. But I think we want to get a little closer to the community, which is really, really cool. Okay, so today's topic, and I'm going to try to explain this as best I can using the magic of my pens in this world. There is data parameterization at a very high level. The number one thing you need to know about having varying or diverse or non-repeated values in a load test. If you record traffic, say with a load runner in a VueGen, and you get the static values from that recording, when you log in as Bob, if you run 1,000 vusers, there's going to be 1,000 sessions for Bob. In the real world, there are not 1,000 instances of Bob. Maybe in the Matrix, it's like Agent Smith. Like maybe you're doing a load to don't be like Agent Smith, where you have like, there's more me. The best part of being me is there's so many of me. Thank you, Agent Smith. That was Hugo Weaving did a marvelous job at that, even if he was digitized. This was the thing with load test. If you just take the static values for login sessions, then you've got 1,000 instances of Agent Smith, and we all know how that turned out. Not good in any way, shape, or form. So what you want to do is replace the hard-coded Bob in your script or Agent Smith and give it a source of random values. Much like the real world, you got all sorts of, maybe you've got 1,000 different user IDs. And when you run 1,000 users, you want to have unique sessions or random sessions across all of those users. So the idea of load test data parameterization is replacing the hard-coded values in a load test in the script with parameterized values. And you're using good old programming skills, variables, and those variables could come from different sources. And so before I go into digging into, and I have some examples, I hope everything works well. I'll flip over and show you some of my own scripts in Jmeter that do this. You can chat me as well if you have specific questions. This is a shout out to Eugene. This entire topic today goes to Eugene from the Tisca. He actually posed this question last night, which was more like, how do I guarantee on iterations, every iteration in terms of user logins, how do I like end a session, choose a different user and log in as a different user? So I'm just kind of riffing it. So if Eugene is even paying attention right now, he can join me in the chat wherever you are. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. But mostly if you have questions about data parameterization, I'll try to answer them today without going too long. I'm feeling like I want to be verbose though for some reason. So maybe this will be an extra long session. Eugene is in the chat. It's great to see you here. So if I miss something from your question, sir, you can gladly put that in the chat, which is awesome. All right. So before I dig into my examples in Jmeter as well as the way I think about data parameterization, I want to say the most important thing from a performance perspective, the reason you want random data, particularly around data, think about data flowing through the system that may have a unique key, could be a primary key or a foreign key within a set of tables within a query. It could have different primary keys or foreign keys in the relationships of the data that you have, where some form of indexing and caching is the key, is very, very important to the performance of that particular query. So if I'm looking up something by customer ID, excuse me, sir, can you tell me the account number? Maybe not a public account number, but a privacy thing. You show me your account number. If I do a select where account number equals blah, 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 there's an index on that. And the first time I make that query, the result set that comes back, well, it's probably going to end up in the caching within the RDBMS or within whatever database system you're using. Could be NoSQL. But it's going to hang around in memory because it's like, hey, somebody's touching this account. We're going to keep that around in memory, and then we can do really fast stuff. But it'll page out, it'll age out back out of cache. So there's usually cache buffers and things within the databases. Well, in the app server too, you might have a session that fires up and actually runs and holds, oh, we're working with account number 63421. Let's keep that structure around in memory so that if the user is kind of doing stuff in the client side, it doesn't have to go all the way to the database. So it warms up and has cache and gets everything. So if you've ever run a load test from cold, once it warms up, you've got a bunch of, hey, frequently used data. Well, there's a bias to show you that you have really fast performance if all 1,000 sessions that you ramp up are logging in as Bob. Bob Smith, also known as Agent Smith, who's also known as Hugo Weaving. So the idea is that you will have what I would say a false negative if you don't randomize the data like the real world, because on that first query, everything will get warmed up and cached, and then it's going to be like, woohoo, we're really fast, things are great. And in reality, when you start hitting this thing with lots of random values and you log out that session and instantiate a new session with a different user ID, all of a sudden the database and all of a sudden all these different pieces are like, oh, I've got to do some real work. Like, wow, you're asking me for lots of strange, I got to go to this table, I got to go way down to this page, I got to go way over to these blocks, that disk, all this other. It's got to run around and find all of your data, and that takes time. So caching and or cache warming is another way to say it. And session caching, especially if you're using something like Redis, if you have Redis cache, you're going through other frameworks and things, you bet you're going to need to make sure you don't bias your load test with static data to make it look like it's super fast, when actually, in the real world with random data, it's not that fast. So how do we solve that problem? I'm going to try to go over here and do this correctly with you guys. There's two different ways to think about where that data comes from. I'm going to show you, first off the bat, the most common one, which is that it comes from a file. Okay, so I'm just going to, you can get these values, a file, some kind of a CSV, typically, because we want to avoid in load generation, we want to avoid transformation. So we like really flat files that we can just read in, parse left to right, parse right to left, left to right, but parse once through the string and grab comma delimited values or tab delimited values out of a flat file, because we want the load generator's CPU to be doing real work. We don't want it to spin this overhead of, oh, well, I pulled in a JSON file and now I need to jump through all these hoops and do this extra work to transform or parse or do whatever. Even those tools can be very fast for you and me to just run a query. If you're running 5,000 transactions per second, you don't want to be doing that on every record. So keep your parameter files totally simple. And then I'm just going to say the type of data you need to flow for your parameters in there. And the simplest one, and this is 2 columns, I'll say. The first is just sequential. So I have a list of logins, and with every iteration in my script, I'm just going to go to the next row, the next row, the next row, the next row. So a sequential listing, and I only go through them once, which means if I want to do a 1-hour load test run, and a session takes 5 minutes, and I want to run n number of users, I need to do the math to figure out, okay, how many rows of data do I need for each of this script to go user by user by user by user by user. And then when I get to the bottom of the file, over here, n number of rows, let's say I'm going to do that, I'm going to have 10 users, they're going to be doing 10 iterations, each, so I have to have 100 rows sequentially, only going to use them once, so I have to have 100 rows in my CSV file, and when it gets to each user, when it gets to the bottom of that, it's 10 users, 10 iterations. Actually, I'll say 10 users doing 100 iterations. There's no unique data here. Let me get that right. You're going to need 100 rows. And when you get to the bottom of the file, you're done running. And the script stops. So at the end of the file, I'm done. There's another one sequentially, and it's just going row by row through the file, which, if you think about it from a memory perspective, is actually really simple to do. You can also go through sequential, but do repeat, right? So now you've still got 10 threads, and they're going to do 100 iterations. I need 100 rows, but actually when I get to the bottom of the file, it'll just go back to the top and repeat. So this may be acceptable if you slowly ramp up your load and you sort of randomly, viewer number 56 is starting at the top of the file, and viewers, everything before it. So it's sort of like being random, but they're all kind of marching in the same step. After the first 30 minutes of the test, you've logged in. Now you're logging in as user 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. And then at some point, they all revert and go back to user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's this looping, and you imagine there's 10 concurrent threads all looping sequentially on that same file. Even if you start them all at the same time, guess what? You've got that caching problem, because all 10 threads will choose the first row in the file. And so now it'll be in lockstep, so you'll have a caching issue. So this is where you get to thinking about, like, how is this data going to flow into my concurrent number of threads? The nice thing about repeating on that data is that if I want to run the test for a longer amount of time, I don't have to go get, now I want to run this for 1,000 iterations. Well, it'll just repeat this 10 times over and over again. So it's kind of like it removes that problem for you for that. Now, the thing that gets really weird is sequential. And you know how I said, if I ran all 10 threads at the same time, they all get the same first row at the same time. Well, what if I want to avoid that? Here's 10 rows, but it's repeating, right? Here's comes down, use those rows, and then repeat over and over again. Sequential, but unique. So here I might have 10 threads, and then I'm going to have them go for 100 iterations, and each of those 10 threads needs a unique 100 rows, a block of 10. So viewer 1 equals the first 100 rows. So I need 1,000 total. Viewer 2 equals, let's say that's 1 to 100. This is going to be 101 to 200. Viewer 3 is going to get 201 to 300. So you have these sort of blocks of data. The way I do that when I need unique data, to avoid the logic, at least it's a limitation within the way Jmeter works. And I think there is maybe a unique data controller or a plugin now that does unique data. LoadRunner forever had the ability to sort of figure that. There's a really nice parameterization engine in LoadRunner to figure that out. In Jmeter, we just did separate CSV files. So this CSV file has 100 rows. CSV file number 2, 100 rows. And they were we segmented the data in the CSV files before the test would run. So the unique data is sort of blocks of data. So there's 100 rows for viewer 1. There's a separate 100 rows for viewer 2. You get the idea. Now, again, there's dependencies on how you ramp up the data. If you don't ramp up, you just boom, run this thing and go for it. Unique is a really good approach if you're going to run and not ramp up, because right off the gate, those first requests, the first thread has unique data. The second thread at the same time is not logging in as Agent Smith. It's logging in as Neo. And then the third one logs in as Trinity. And if you haven't gone to see the Matrix Resurrections, I highly recommend it. It's very good. It's a very well done movie. So check out the sequential capabilities within your tool, depending on how you're ramping up and what your requirement is for. And when I say login, parameterizing login could be user ID and password. If you're parameterizing an account number, like doing searches, that's where it's like, no, well, I've got unique sessions figured out. I can't, like, it could even be in your system that the same person can't log in twice. So you have to have unique data for your logins and passwords, logins and users. That brings me to the next thing, which is to say random. The other most common one is you've got, here's a file with n number of rows, and it chooses, it randomizes the file pointer. So it just figures out random rows. And if I've got 10 threads, I could say, hey, just randomly pick from 10 rows, or randomly pick from 100 rows, or randomly pick from 1,000 rows, or 204,416 there, however many rows you got. And one of the things, like if you just like, okay, once you get logged in uniquely, just pick any random account number and go do the lookup and the detail and change one value, commit that, and then log out. Could be the scenario, something like that. If you're browsing through, let's say, an e-commerce, so everyone logs in uniquely to the website or to the app, and they pick a random product from the catalog, navigate down to that product, buy that product. 10% of the, well, let's say 80% of the time, you're just going to browse between 3 and 10 products, choose them randomly. We don't care what product it is. It's just be random. You could have a hot products where here's the top 100. So you're definitely going to do 3 hits to the top 100 and then between 4 and 10 other searches on any other product item. So you could get really elaborate with like 2 data files of here's all the product IDs and then here's the hot products we want to push. That could be cool. All right. But the idea with random, but it just gets used once, well, that's really hard because with sequential, you can actually follow that file pointer down and you get to the bottom of the row. It's like, oh, I'm at the end of file. Stop. But if you're randomly jumping around, it's really weird to imagine I want random as the data, but I only want to use that data once during the course of the load test. Now, if you're in, say, Load Runner, where you feed a beautiful engine where you feed that in, it will keep track of what rows, I think it will keep. I mean, the Otis might just do this too. We could check. Or if you're building it yourself, you would actually have to figure out a table in memory in your virtual user to say, what rows have I used and what rows haven't I used? And I just keep picking random ones until I can't get any more rows randomly. And you're done. In Jmeter, the way I've done that is I take a source file of CSV, and before the test runs, sort of script it out pre-test, maybe do this with a bash script or something like that, I would just do a sort unique and split, or sort unique in some random order. I would still go sequentially, but I put them in a randomized order. So even though I'm still going down line by line by line, the numbers are random, but they're sort of set to be statically assigned from a random function before the test even runs. So that's one way I would do that. But still, you would get to the very bottom, you're done running, you've used all the source data in a random way to do that. And so that's how you would do it once. More common is just random order of data, any file pointer, and repeat. So I just pick any account number and you can run forever, however long you want to log in once, and then just keep repeating stuff transactionally for 10 hours. And just pick a random product, go look at a product, do some stuff. Pick a random account number, go do it. So random repeat is actually pretty good. That's pretty common. I think sequential repeat, sequential unique are very common, and random repeat is also very common. The other thing, much like that other one you could do, is random unique. Sorry to spell that right. Random unique data, which is where you would split the files out. So again, start with a single file that's your source. randomize the order of those records, split them out into unique individual CSVs, and then feed them into your test tool, that would be a Jmeter approach. It's a little cumbersome. Wouldn't it be nice? Some of these test tools do that for you. It's really nice. So you can figure that out. So if you appreciate not having to mess around with automating all of these low-level file functions and et cetera, check out the load runner parameterization engine. Neotis has a really nice, obviously Flood.io could be Gatling or Jmeter based. You're kind of already there. And there are some interesting limitations. I won't say limitations, but a very focused way that you can use external data files within the Flood platform. Exactly. Check that out. Now, are there other ways that you could parse your data? Anytime I get out of just sequential and random, unique, repeat, out of these sort of ways of thinking of it, I end up going into a test tool. I end up falling out into programming functions. So I'll show you a couple of them, the way I would do stuff to get random data on the fly. So you're like, I need a unique value per this and such. And I'm like, wow, it's really hard to figure out how to do that in a file. So I might as well, like in LoadRunner, I would just write a C function to create a string. In Jmeter, there's a bunch of functions to create random strings. K6, I contributed a cool little function that does random strings from a source set. So we'll do that. So I'm going to try to make sure that I get this right. If you see my mouse moving around there. Aha! So we're in Jmeter, and hopefully you guys are seeing Jmeter. I'll keep an eye at the corner of my eye here. There you go. This is the CSV dataset config within Jmeter, and I have, just as an example for sequential and or random assignment of those files, this is, I can delete those. That's kind of, in Jmeter, I always put my scratch code sitting in the comments file. This is all fake data. There's nothing special about what you're seeing here. And I hopefully there's nothing, I think there's anything you can see on the screen that's totally unique or weird or violating my compliance training. You get the idea. So look up in Jmeter CSV dataset config, which for these sequential source CSV files or random source CSV files, this is the most common way that you would set it up. Now I use this weird sort of modular controller, and then I just put that dataset config. I try to keep it close to the thread group before I actually call into the module to run the script. And here's why. I like to make sure I get my source data. One, I don't have to change this very often. Once this is set up and kind of assigned for a script, I can leave it, right? It's just this is a CSV file. You can imagine it's got these fields. There's a few settings here in terms of like the header line, delimiters. If you want to do tab delimited, you can do any kind of delimiter. But I really recommend for efficiency within the load generation engine, try to keep it just a flat file. Very simple string parsing is easy. Other mechanisms are fast, but for a single session. But when it comes to like hammering through this stuff, knowing a couple of things are there. So here's a couple of the settings. Remember I said if you want to use something once, you would set your recycle on the end of file, EOF is end of file. Recycle on end of file, false. Once you get to the bottom, done. And then do I stop the thread at the end of the file? True or false, right? And you could do there's some advanced stuff you can do there too. So if I did don't recycle and I do end of file true, well, that means I get to the last row in the file and done. The thread will stop, the load test is over. Or in sequence, whenever, if you're running 1,000 threads, it eventually all of them will run out of data and they stop running. What happens if I set this to stop thread on end of file? I believe it gets to the last value and then just repeats that last value over and over and over again. So let's say we went through all 1,000 unique users and then the last one is Morpheus, to stay on theme. It'll just be Morpheus for the next 45 minutes of the test because we ran out of data and the last value just says, how come we got all these weird failures after 30 minutes of running, all the rest of them? Oh, because you kept trying to log in as Morpheus over and over again. Okay, that's a problem. All right, so that's how you would control in Jmeter. And these are also available. This is a GUI version. It's been around a very long time. And where you would load these you can do them as functions as well. So if you go in and you can actually access sort of CSVs from functions, if you're in Bash scripts, or you're in if you're in Bean Shell or in Groovy, like I'd like to do in Groovy, that works really well. So, and recycle at the end of the file, I usually say true, and that's the sequential repeat. And then stop thread at the end of the file, false. So now it can just keep repeating over and over again for the entire duration of the test. The other thing that's interesting here is this setting for sharing mode. And this sharing mode in Jmeter is sort of a simplified way of what LoadRunner might do if you say, I want unique blocks of data, this unique sequential, unique random kind of ways of putting the blocks together. So you can, once you access, if I say, I'm going to share this file, it's going to load it for all the threads in this thread group. And that means it actually, in memory, loads that file once. And if Vuser1 starts up and goes record 1, record 2, record 3, when Vuser2 wakes up, it will start at record 4. So the file pointer is sort of synchronized across all of those. Every iteration, they're all in lockstep. Remember what I told you about caching and biasing the cache stuff. This would really cache all the data. You're not using unique data at all. If that would be the current thread group, maybe all threads is all thread groups. If I just do current thread, that means each thread will get its own file pointer. So Vuser1 will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. And then a few seconds later, the second thread wakes up to start running on a ramp up, and it'll start on its own. 1, 2, 3. Now they're sort of trailing one another by n number of records, but they independently manage their own data file, or their own file pointer in that. And then you can do advanced stuff. So to get totally unique but random data, if I were to do something where right here, these are like fake credit cards, right? So I have individual fake credit cards. But if I go here, if I go into cards, here's all my fake data. Notice all of this data is like cards 346, cards 347, cards 348. That's so I can assign individual unique data to each of these virtual users. And I don't know if I don't have an example. I apologize for that. You could use the virtual user ID in the naming of the file. So like here you could do, like under there, function, like thread num or whatever that is. You could come up with a thread num CSV using a variable within the name of the file. So now every time this wakes up, thread number 1 uses CSV number 1. Thread number 2 uses CSV number 2. And of course, when you think about combining that with this sharing mode, am I sharing that file with other threads? Let's say I have a common product IDs or unique product IDs. So you can get really powerful stuff with splitting out all of your data. And again, like here I've got some Scratch Bash scripts, some other pieces running here. But at its heart, there's just a cards.csv, which is the main single cards. I've got some backup scripts and stuff. But you get the idea that you could just play around with this data file. I use Rundeck to sort of set up the test data before I run the script. And that's kind of how I keep things running. So these are by manipulating things in a CSV file. If you have a more sophisticated test tool, you can do all sorts of cool stuff within their parameterization engines. If you're in Jmeter, kind of get familiar with how you're massaging your CSVs to do that. I think the last thing that Eugene asked was I'm going to go back. The last thing Eugene asked was sort of, how do I ensure, we talked about getting unique data, and putting things in there. If I actually look at some of the options, again, this is completely generic, in terms of this kind of stuff. I don't know what here's test stores and test numbers and things like that. But there's an option in here about keep alive, and some other settings for request defaults in Jmeter that would reset and the settings. So at the end of an iteration, if you don't keep alive your connection on that last sampler, then it'll drop the connection, and that may drop the session that you were logged into. Or you can, and then go to the top and then start a whole new session and log into all that stuff. The other piece you can look at are some of these other configurations. I think it's configuration elements. So you've got a cookie manager. So if you reset the cookies, a cache manager, if you reset the cache. So you could do all sorts of things about changing up what that configuration, HTTP configuration, looks like if you're in the web world. If you're in lower level modes in protocol stack, if you're in sockets or a JDBC or talking RMI, then the sort of the login session is not really applicable. It may not be applicable. When you go to the top of the script, you would reset that stuff. You might do it in here. This is from last night's stuff. I'm going to remove that. In my script, like samplers runs the test. Maybe I have some sort of cleanup test here. So I could add, let's just do a flow control action. Let's say flow control action, and then add like just, let's say, come on now. Preprocessor, let's just put in a JavaScript preprocessor. And let's say I would write some Groovy code to reset this session, something like that. Right? So when it's looping around this thread group over and over and over again, this thread group X, Y, and Z, it comes out of the script, and then you could rename this like reset user. The other thing I wanted to show you, and I want to make sure I can do this in a data setup. Yeah, there's nothing in here. These are some of these random string functions that you see in Jmeter. Or I'm like, I don't want to have to put that in a CSV. It does incur some, if you did hundreds of these, you'd have a massive CPU overhead in your load generator. But look into how you're using these random functions to create like, different device IDs, comments, grand total, all these. This is really, benign kind of stuff. There's nothing special to know about this. But these are just variables that I created in my script to match stuff up, and I just put them under a data setup piece, and here this would be a reset user step there with the groovy JavaScript stuff, right? So Eugene, you're on the chat with me. I'm really hoping that I answered enough to think about how to move unique data to your threads, sequentially loop over those things, and if you need to, use the data once and throw it away, and then you can't repeat it, so you got to make sure you have enough data to feed as many virtual user steps as you need to have. So you might do some math to say, if I'm going to do 100 threads running 1,000 iterations over the course of time, do I have 100? Do I have 100,000 rows? Do they need to be split out and unique? And then in the script itself, you need to make sure, like for logins, if you log in, create a session, at the very end, log out, reset the HTTP context, grab the next login from the CSV file, start the next iteration, and away you go. And there you have kind of an introduction to data parameterization within Jmeter and other tools. Even though I'm not demoing other tools, boy, it's like having electric leather seats in Windows when you go to something like Jmeter's parameterization or LoadRunner's parameterization engine. Neotis is also very good. Neoload is nice. Anyway, cool. Thank you very much. Eugene, I'm sorry we didn't answer this last night. We had a good time getting on, and Susan Marie asked all the questions and took all the time away. She's very distracting. But it turns out this was a beautiful thing to cover in a Friday session with you, and it's a little longer one than usual for the PerfBytes community. So if you want to join Eugene and myself, there is a community in Triangle Testing. They have a Slack group. And they have meetups coming. I think they're going to do one in person, potentially in August or September or something like that. So they're getting ready, but they do online meetups. So shout out to the Tisca community. Leandro is here. Hola, Leandro. Senior Performo was on the chat, who's also a longtime friend. He and I met at the Tisca conference We just did it virtually in March or February, March. And so check it out. You can, if you want to, join Eugene and Leandro and myself. I think Federico's over there. There's all kinds of great folks over in the Triangle Testing Slack as well. It's not two other announcements for you. One, I am teaching, if you go to Coveros, which is like the STAR conference. Eugene was also a speaker in TISCA 2022, which if you join the group, you could probably go back. I don't know if they recorded the sessions, but good for you, Eugene. Right on, man. So I'm teaching a class next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. You know, it's never too late if you want to just jump in on that curriculum. If you're new to load and performance, it's kind of a overview look, but it also involves some hands-on. It uses Jmeter. We do some other stuff plugged into Jenkins. It's 2 days back-to-back, Tuesday and Wednesday. Thank you to Coveros. I have a conflict on Thursday, which is the other thing I want to tell you about. But so we're going to do Tuesday and Wednesday next week. And you can go to coveros.com, the training, look for load and performance. It's not too late. You could sign up even on Monday if you're getting this. So join me for that training. It repeats also August 23rd, 24th, same kind of thing. And I think I'm confirmed to teach that as well. But it's really fun, kind of intro to load and performance testing. And it's like, it's jam-packed. It's like six hours a day for 2 days. So we really get it done. Next Thursday is Test Bash World, and I'm a big fan of Test Bash. It's a Test Bash home. I was on the Test Bash function, whatever the Test Bash Tech Conference, Geek Nerd Conference, Automation Conference. I went through my whole Jmeter Rundeck rig. It was really fun. Next week, do a watch party. Get your crew together at your company. Tell the development teams, I'm really sorry, but we're taking 1 day a year, and we're going to do Test Bash World. And all we're going to do is watch live streams and then do your own talks, like invite your teams to do mini talks, do 99-second talks. So that's Test Bash World if you look for the Ministry of Testing out there as well. It's totally fun. We're going to be doing it. We're going to be live streaming our watch party with the Test Bash folks so you can actually see that kind of stuff. At the same time, if you're an automated tester or tester, I will just give a shout out for my company, FreedomPay. We're hiring. So if you want to come and hook up with a great company in the payment space and play around with fake credit card numbers, it's really fun. All the test data is fake. We don't really have access to the real data, to be honest with you. You can always check out freedompay.com careers. I think it's in Lever or Indeed or something like that. It's really cool. So we are actively growing and hiring, as I'm sure many folks are out there. So if you want to do some work on that career of yours, let me know. Let us know. That'd be great. And we'll see you next time on PerfBytes, usually every Friday. I want to try to keep going through the summer all on every Friday. If you have topics, again, thank you, Eugene. This is a great topic. If you have other questions you want me to cover or dig into or try to dig into, I'm happy to do that. So just shoot them over, join our Discord. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Leandro, Senior Performer for PerfBytes Español. We've got Is It Observable from Henrik. You've got News of the Damned from James. There's books. Oh my, there's so many fun things happening. But mostly I hope you have a great weekend. It's supposed to be very nice here in the Northeast before the heat wave. I'm very sorry if you're stuck in the middle of the country in a terrible heat wave right now. I'm sure it's going to end up here at some point. So that'll be good. Thank you guys, and I'll see you soon on the next thing of PerfBytes.